Tov, everyone, from the Kodesh, Yerushalayim, Kodesh. So we have, of course, it's Motzaei Shabbos. Hey, Rebecca, it's Motzaei Shabbos, and we tell the story of tzaddikim, of the Baal Shem Tov, and we learn a little halacha on the laws of tefillah. So it's a time of miracles now, and it's getting ready for Purim. So I'm going to allow for two stories tonight. They're not about the Baal Shem Tov, but two fascinating stories, one connected to Purim. I saw a story told by Rabbi Zevin from the Holy Kodesh Samagid. The Holy Kodesh Samagid, we learned about the Kodesh Samagid. It was in the time of the Alter Rebbe, a student of the Maggid of Mizrich. So he lived in a place in Koznitz, and he was also the Baal Korah. He would read the Megillah when it came time for Purim in his Beis Medrash, in his shul. And there was a Yid, a very, very poor man who lived in the farm villages around Koznitz. And comes Purim, he decided he's going to walk into Koznitz to the Maggid's shul and going to hear the Megillah. And leaving at home his wife and kids who couldn't make it. However, they were very left at home with mamish. He said there was nothing there. There was no food. There was nothing for them to eat. But he says, hopefully, he's trying to think what he could do. But he had to hear the Megillah. So he goes to Koznitz and he hears the Megillah from the Holy Kodesh Maggid. And when he hears it, the way the Maggid said the Megillah so beautifully, so he's mamish overwhelmed, and he runs over to the Maggid after the Megillah reading, and he tells the Maggid, he says that he mamish wants to tell the Maggid he felt so holy when the Maggid was reading the Megillah. He felt the story was alive, etc. And so the Maggid says, "Where do you live, Rabbi Yid?" So he says, "In such and such village." He says, "Well, that village is in my area," meaning the rabbis had different areas that they were under. That the villages they took care of different. The Chabad was in Lubavitch and Lublin, and you had Lezhensk. These are names of cities and areas. So the Kodesh Maggid was in the area of Koznitz, and he said, "So you're in my area." He said, "So did you bring me shalach manas?" So he says he was bashed, he was ashamed. He says, "Rebbe, I have nothing. I don't have nothing to bring you." So the Kodesh Maggid says, "Well, if you live in my area, you should bring me shalach manas." So he says, "You know what? Come to my house." And we're having a little gathering, a little farbrengen after Megillah reading. So he comes to the Kodesh Maggid's house, and there's some of the Chassidim there. And the Kodesh Maggid gives him a little l'chaim, and they have a little mezainis, and they're singing, and he's mamish feeling very uplifted in the spirit of Purim. And he walks out, and he decides, you know what? He goes to the wine store, and he tells the wine store, the owner, he says, "Listen, could you give me a bottle of wine on loan? I'll pay you back after Purim. And if not, today's Purim, so just, they would call it a Purim gift." So the person said, "Sure," and he gave him a bottle of wine. And then he went to the fruit shop and he said, to ask the fruit man, he said, could you give me some fruits, a few apples on loan? I'll pay you after Purim. And if not, then today's Purim." He said, "Sure," and he let him take a few apples. And he took a few apples and a bottle of wine. He ran back to the Kodesh Maggid, and he told the Kodesh Maggid, he says, "Rebbe, here's shalach manas." So the Kodesh Maggid says, "Oh, it's very good that you did this." And he said, "Make sure, never forget, every year to bring me shalach manas." So when he comes, after he leaves the Kodesh Maggid, he goes out and he thinks, his wife and children are home alone, and they don't have anything for Yom Tov. So he went back to the wine shop. Are you ready if he's buying on credit? He says, again, the same thing, if you could give me a bottle of spirit, and I'll pay you after Purim. If not, today's Purim. And then he goes to the meat shop and the fish shop and the baker, and he buys all the things he would need for a Suda. And he comes home and his wife and kids are looking at him like, it's Purim, we have nothing. He said, no, he has bags and boxes of food, and they're going to have a beautiful Suda, and everyone was so happy, and the whole family were dancing, the Simcha of Yom Tov, and dancing, and mamish, beautiful Simcha, and all of a sudden there's a pounding on the door. So they got scared, because the pounding on the door in Eastern Europe in those days wasn't usually together with good news. So they said, "Be quiet, don't answer the door." The person kept on pounding on the door. So finally says, maybe it's the farmer who brings potatoes sometimes. So they opened the door, and it was a Gentile who was bloodied up, and mamish falls into their house. They take him and the wife and the kids, and they wash him up, they clean him, they bandage him, and they give him from their meal, the food, they give him a little spirit to relax. They give him some cake and challah and fish and wine. He relaxes. After all, he said, "You're so nice to me." I heard you're dancing and I heard that your house that was up, so I came to your door. He said, I'm mamish grateful. You saved my life. And, I got into some disagreement with my son, and my son mamish beat me almost to death. And I decided now that you've been taking care of me, I've never told my son that I actually have a treasure. I've saved money all my years, and I'm actually a wealthy man, but I kept it all in the treasure, and I was going to give it to my son. But I don't feel he deserves it. And I feel you're a loving family, and I'd like you to have my treasure. And he takes him to the forest, and he gives him his treasure, and immediately this family's fortunes turns around, and Baruch Hashem, the next year he comes to Kodesh Samagid with a beautiful basket, a huge shalchmanis, because he saw clearly the bracha, the blessing of the Holy Kodesh Samagid, how it brought him and his family mamish beautiful success and a change of life. Sometimes the message, obviously, the story is how sometimes you don't understand, but the tzaddik sometimes needs to push open the gate of brachas. So by him getting the shalchmanis and not sure how he's going to pay for it, but going out there and doing the mitzvah was the way he was able to open the valve for the blessings of Hashem. Second story that I wanted to tell, I read the story many times. A story that it's happened with my great grandfather, Reb Shmuel Vitin, who was a big chassid, and of the Rebbe Rashab and the Rebbe Friedrich Rebbe and the Rebbe and a Rav and a Shliach, a Shadar in different countries on behalf of the Lubavitch. And at the end of his life, before the war, he made it to the United States, and he was there before the previous Lubavitch Rebbe. And when the previous Rebbe came to 770, he gave my grandfather, because his family didn't come out, his wife and some of his children didn't make it out, and they were killed by the Nazis in the Vilna ghetto. So he was a single man. And so the Friedrich Rebbe gave him one of the rooms in 770. It was called Reb Shmuel's room. He was the mashpi of the yeshiva, the spiritual guide of the yeshiva. And the Friedrich Rebbe says this is Reb Shmuel's room. And Reb Shmuel would farbring. So there's someone who wrote a book of the memories of the different talks and stories that he heard from my great grandfather Reb Shmuel. So he said that in the year tough that there was year poor that was in the year Tafshin Hay, the Friedrich Rebbe wasn't well, and my grandfather was the mashpia, and he gets a phone call from what was known then as the Ramash. The Ramash was the name that was given for our Rebbe, the Lubavitch Rebbe, who was the son-in-law of the previous Rebbe, who called my great-grandfather and says, the Rebbe, meaning the Friedrich Rebbe, wants to know if the Bachrim are for bringing on Rosh Chodesh Adar. So they right away closed this farm and they took out a bottle of mashk and they started to farbring. And Reb Shmuel my great-grandfather told this story like this. He said that in Tafshin Beis in 1942, he was alone in his room, and it was Purim. I guess there was one or two people sitting with him, but they had nothing. They had no mashka. They had nothing to celebrate Purim with. Things weren't so financially well then in the institutions as well. The previous Rebbe just made it to America, and the previous Rebbe was sitting shiva then for his mother, so he wasn't able to give. Shalchmanis. The Oval doesn't give Shalchmanis, and they were sitting there feeling a little umadik in Yiddish is the word, kind of down or depressed. They had a bottle of mashka. Someone took it. There was nothing to fabrang on. There was nothing to be simcha with. And all of a sudden, there was a knock on the door in his Reb Shmuel's room. And the Rebbitzin, meaning the previous Rebbe's Rebbitzin, Rebbitzin Chamadina, she sent down Shalchmanis to Reb Shmuel, a cake and a bottle of mashka. So now they had what to fabrang. They had a cake and a bottle of mashka. And they started to tell stories. So they said a whole bunch of beautiful stories. The first story, I'll tell one story. The first story he told was like this, that there was different students of the Maggid that lived in the city of Frankfurt on Main. I think it was there was Pinchas Karitzer, and there was also Pinchas, and there was also Rabbi Yaiva. They both lived together. And Pinchas was the Rav, and the Hafla. So he was known as the Hafla. That was the name of his sefer. So he was the Rav, and he had first of all he had a salary, and second of all he had most of the community came to him Purim, and he had a big. Okay, I may have to go into the bomb shelter in a second. So he said everyone was dancing with Hafla. Everyone was there, and Rabbi Aiba was very poor. He had no one, and he had a few old poor people at his table. He had nothing to give them. And then he started to think about the things of Torah, and he himself ran, and the poor people ran to the Hafla. He was alone. He's alone. He wakes up. He sees no one's around him. All of a sudden, there's a knock on the door. And there's this old, poor man standing there with a bag on his shoulders, and he says, "Can I do Purim Sudas Purim by you?" So he says, sure, but I have no food to give you. He says, don't worry, I have food. He says, let's say l'chaim. I have no l'chaim. He says, I'll give you l'chaim. So he pulls out a big hamantash and food, and they start eating and start dancing and dancing. And they make so much noise that all the people by the haflah come running to see what's happening by Rabbi Iva. And they see these two people dancing with simcha. Even the haflah came. Afterwards, the haflah said that in Shemayim, they saw that Rabbi Iva was sad. And they said, how could Rabbi Iva be sad on Purim? So Mordechai Yehudi, Mordechai, the story of Purim, said, I'm going to come down to this world with a hamantash and l'chaim, and I'm going to make Rabbi Iva happy. And that's the second story that I heard. So that ends the stories for tonight. Again, thank you, Judith, for the inspiration of telling Purim stories and stories on Motzaei Shabbos. Let's go to a little bit of a halacha until I have to leave. It seems like I may have to leave this class in a few minutes, but hold on a second. Let's bring up the laws of Shemoneh Esrei. Okay, we're holding halacha gimel. The halacha says like this: Hamispalel tzarech sheyeda. When a person davens, a person that you have to know, the davener, the prayer, the person who prays has to know. Shahashchina kenegdoi. And you have to take davening seriously. The Hashem is standing, the Shechina, the presence of God, is in front of you. K'mo yishenemer, like it says, Shivchi chamayim libeich noichach p'nei Hashem. Pour out your heart like water before the presence of Hashem. So the presence of Hashem is before you when you pour out your heart. V'yoyer hakavana, you should awaken the proper intentions. V'yoser kol hamachshavos hatordos haisai. And get rid of all distracting thoughts. Don't allow thoughts to distract you when you're davening. And we all know that's very difficult. Until your mind and your thoughts and your concentration is zaka, is pure and focused on the prayer. V'yachshav, and you should concentrate, especially when talking about doing standing Shemoneh Esrei, the Amidah. V'yachshav, and you should think, how would you stand in front of a king of flesh and blood? Standing in front of a powerful king, how you'd be focused and not distracted. You would make sure you articulate your words, and you concentrate and you put proper meaning into it. The vali kashal, not to stumble in your presentation of your plea. Kavchom, even more so. Before the King of all kings, Hashem, you have to properly concentrate when it comes time to davening. Because when you're talking, he says here an interesting thing. Like Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says, that it's not just that you could make sure you say the words right. Because to Hashem, your thoughts are like speech. So he hears your thoughts. Hashem hears your thoughts. So your thoughts have to be clear and focused. And it says, interesting halacha. He says, he's analyzing your thoughts. So you can't just say, well, you're saying the words. Hashem is in tune with what you're thinking when you daven. And a person, like we know, has to prepare themselves for davening. And what does it mean to prepare yourself for davening? That before you daven, you should think about the roimim musakel, the greatness of Hashem, Yisparach, blessed be He, v'shiflis adam, and how lowly a person is. And then by doing that and focusing means looking at something so great. But Yasser called Tanugi Adam Libo, and take out all the personal pleasures from your heart. Meaning here, this is the Shulchan Aruch, the Kitzur is going a little bit in a Musar Chassidus idea that you can't just stand there and daven. You have to get rid of the Tanugi Adam Libo, the things that are pleasurable to you, like kind of thing, get to stay focused on what's holy and what's proper in your davening. Okay, let's see the footnotes over here. We have, I think, footnote number 9 and 10. He quotes the source of the. So he says, consider as if you're speaking before a mortal king, a king of flesh and blood. All right, I thought that was self-understood. Let's continue. Law number 4. Hamispalel, when a person davens, tzarech shichaven liboy, v'perish hamilois, shehu ma'itzi misfasav. Okay, that's why we have Baruch Hashem today, the Sidurim in English or other languages that helps a person. But when you daven and you say the words, you should try to be mechaven, to concentrate on the meaning of the translation of the words, to know what you're saying. Shenemar tachin libam guide their heart. Takshiv oznecha, let your ear be attentive to what you're saying. Ukfar nitvesu harbi sidurim in Pirush Ashkenaz. So the Kitzur says that those days, meaning in the, what does he translate Ashkenaz as, German or Yiddish? He says, with translation. Okay, Ashkenaz means the translation. The Ashkenaz then was either reference to Germany, the German, or Yiddish, that people understood better than the Lashon HaKodesh. Therefore, basically, spend time studying the Siddur with translation, whatever the translation is for each person, to translate so you're familiar with the meanings of the words when you say them. What happens if you can't? It's hard for you to concentrate on the translation, the meanings of the words. The person at least should think, while they're davening, you should think about humbling thoughts. To focus your heart towards Hashem. If a person, a foreign thought pops into your head, whether it's an inappropriate thought or just not the right thought for this moment, so yishtoik v'yamtim achis machshava. So he says you should be silent. This is what the Kitzur suggests. You should be silent and wait for the thought to vanish. Wait for the thought to pass so you could stay concentrated. Okay. Let's see. 11 is just quotes the source. And 12, he says, many prayer books are published with translation. Obviously, this is also true to prayer books that have been translated into English and other languages. Okay, meaning to say it's not just specifically Ashkenaz, which is either German or Yiddish, but obviously whatever the language is that you would use to translation. Okay, he continues. How does one prepare themselves to daven Shemoneh Esrei? So he says, Yichavin raglov, zu eitzel zu. Put your feet together. Kilu einin halachos, making your foot as if they were one. That's where people put their feet together while they daven. Lihidamis malachim shnemar v'ragleihem regli yishara. He says to be like the angels. That says, and their feet were straight feet. Like so, regel yishara. It says this straight feet or a straight foot. Kloimer ragleim nearest keregalachas, meaning straight. It looks like a flamenco, one foot. Yachav reishay ma'at lamata. Bow your head a bit inwards. V'yiskir einayv. Obviously, close your eyes. We're talking about in the case that you're either davening by heart or in between. But obviously, if you're davening from the siddur, you have to look at the words. Shleistakel b'shem davar means by closing your eyes means don't look at other things. But if you're davening out of a siddur, obviously, don't remove your eyes from the siddur. You should put your hand by your heart. Your right hand over your left. We know that's what we do. The right over left always. You should daven with a complete heart. With fear, with awe, bachna, and with humility. Like a poor person standing by the door, waiting for someone to give them charity. That's how you should stand, with a kind of humility when you daven the Shemoneh Esrei. And tell out the words with proper intention. Ubidiktuk, with exactness, means pronunciation of the words to be as proper as possible. Okay, obviously, if a person has struggles with the pronunciation, as best as you can. V'yispal kol echad kafi means don't get OCD about it. V'yispal kol echad kafi hanuscha shalai hein Ashkenaz haisfard, and you daven your nusach, whether the nusach is nusach Ashkenaz, if you're from the Ashkenazi community, or if you're from the Sephardi community, nusach Sfard. Ukedoima kula misaydasim Kodesh, and he says, or any of the based on that Kedema kula misaydasim Kodesh, we know that all of them, their foundations are from a holy place, that the siddur is proper according to the nusach, according to the people that daven, depending where you're from. Don't mix nusachs. You can't mix siddurim. Either you daven from one nusach or another nusach. You can't take words from here and take words from there and kind of put together your own tefillah. You have to know that every nusach, every style of davening, what the siddur is the words are counted exact and they're in an appropriate way. So you have to be careful, Taka, because this is something important. Sometimes you daven in a shul, either if you're the Baal tefillah or what have you. So you have either if you're davening out of a nusach Ashkenaz, say the words out of the nusach Ashkenaz. If you're davening out of nusach Sfard, say the words of Sfard. You can't add words or mix words if you're familiar that your words are different. Either do your nusach or do the other nusach, but don't try to mix nusachos. Al pi Soidus Gedolim, and it's based on secrets of Torah, Kabbalistic secrets. The Sidurim are not just simply words put together to spray. Everything's exact according to the way it was done by the person who authored the Siddur. Do not add or do not take out. If you have a nusach, stick with it, daven with it. And again, this applies also for those who daven at the Amud. If they're davening at an Amud, depending on we talked about this before, the custom of the shul of how that works. But if you're davening for the Amud and it's not your nusach and you're davening another nusach, say the nusach that you're davening, and we'll discuss it another time. How does that work with the quiet Shemoneh Esrei versus the loud Shemoneh Esrei? Okay, the repeating of the Shemoneh Esrei. He quotes the verse of their feet are straight. In Hebrew, regel means 1 foot. So regel is 1 foot. For ragleim regel yishara means that the angels are like 1 foot. So you stand like angels. Put your feet together as if they were 1 foot. Footnote number 14. Baruch Hashem, looks like we beat this alarm. I got a warning that there's going to be an alarm. It doesn't seem like it went off. Okay. In other words, a prayer book. So there's a prayer book. 15 says, in the manner of a beggar pleading for alms. It means like what does it mean? Oni standing a Pesach Habayis, Pesach, meaning the person who's standing there knocking on someone's door, hoping the person is generous to give them tzedakah. That's how you should daven before Hashem, with that humility. We could all imagine, hopefully, didn't have to experience the humility of that experience. There are various texts of the Siddur prayers, okay, Nusach Ashkenaz and Sfard, and within themselves, the different Nuschos. 17, he says, one should follow the text of the Siddur he's using. Okay, again, the question when it comes to if you're leading the Amud, hold on a second. It says, Lo yismoich atzmei al shum davar. When you stand the Shemoneh Esrei, do not lean on anything. You're not supposed to lean on something when you daven, something to support your standing, unless obviously this is a case where you could stand on your own. Afilu smicha kolti, any kind of support. Let's say you're sick or old and it's hard for you to stand alone. Then you could daven even if you're sitting or lying. But again, you have to be able to concentrate when you're davening. So if you can't concentrate, it's another issue. And here the Kitzur says that if you are not able to if you're not able to concentrate on the words or pronounce the words, or too sick maybe to pronounce the words, so then you should you should think in your heart. Judith, you asked a question about saying Tillim for Yisrael. Of course, Tillim in general is good to say. There's various chapters that different people are saying, but definitely the chapters of 130 and 120, 121 are the chapters that definitely one should say for the safety of the Jewish people in Klal Yisrael worldwide and in Eretz Yisrael. All right, a chapter of Halacha, law number 8. And then I think we will finish here and open to questions and then kind of wrap up the class. Oh, let's see the footnotes over here. The law applies only to Shemoneh Esrei. Okay, this law of not leaning is not during the davening itself, it's just during the Amidah. So the pre-Amidah, pre-Shemoneh Esrei, post-Shemoneh Esrei, it's okay to lean. I mean, obviously, it's to stand with a respectful way, but if you need support. You must lie down, you should turn on your side while praying. So we learned this about Shema. If you have to lie down, try as much as possible to turn to your side, not to be lying on your back or obviously your stomach when you're praying, if you can. If you are too ill or too weak to articulate the words, then you could pray through thought. All right, he continues. Lo yoichaz biyadei b'shas tefillah Shemoneh Esrei rak hasidr or hamachtim sarchlei. Only the prayer book you should be holding during davening. You You could put thumbtacks. I mean, sorry, notes or page dividers to know where you're supposed to be davening in your Siddur Machzor today. The Siddur made that you shouldn't have to have that. You could daven, everything's in order. So the point is, you should have your Siddur organized, that you don't have to start flipping your Siddur during the davening. So make sure if you're davening, let's say Shabbos, Chol Hamoed or Musaf or Rosh Chodesh, that you have your place before you start davening, everything organized, so you don't start flipping your siddur before davening. Again, standing in front of a king, that would be that you would understand how that's inappropriate. You should have your books set and ready to open properly, like you do in a meeting. So too you do before you daven with Hashem. Obviously, kal v'chomer. Lo yeh davar chaitzis beinay lebein akir, shenemar vayosef Chizkiyahu panav el akir v'yispal. It's a famous, beautiful pasuk that talks about King Chizkiyahu when he was sick. So he said he turned his face towards the wall and prayed. So he said there should be no barrier between you and the wall. V'loi mikri chatzitza el davar shegayva yud tfachim. What's the separation? Something that is 10 tfachim, which is about 24, I think, or 25 inches tall. V'rachav dal tfachim has to be wide, also 4 tfachim, which is about 12 to 14 inches wide. But something small is not considered separation. I feel davar gadol imhu davar kavua k'gan aron v'teva lechashav hefsek. So too, of course, a something that's positioned like a bookcase or a cupboard, that's not called a separation between you and the wall. So a person doesn't separate you from the wall. If there's no other choice, that's not something you should get hysterical about. If there's no way for you to daven actually by the wall, then it's okay. Because you're focused anyways. You're closing your eyes or you're looking in the siddur, and that will be enough in the case where there's no option for you to daven next to a wall. Again, that you shouldn't lose your concentration. We don't pray in front of a picture. Or a mirror for that matter. And if you're standing in front of something like a clothing or a painting or even a painted wall that could cause you to distract yourself, you should close your eyes or really focus in the siddur and not look out. Same thing, the idea is also not to stand by a window. He says it's forbidden to daven in front of a mirror. In the case of a mirror, even with closed eyes. He says you should not daven in an open place like a field, because when you daven in an enclosed place, then you have the proper focus in standing in front of a king. Hold on, Rebecca, let me just finish the law. But if you have no choice, you're in the way, you're in the traveling, so you could daven in the field. Best to daven between the trees. Yes, Rebecca.
I have a couple of questions. So first of all, what's the issue with davening facing a window? Like some people, when they look at nature, like trees and grass and whatever, they feel closer to Hashem and helps them to connect.
The issue of davening in front of a window is the issues are just the idea of distraction.
What if like you're a few floors up from the street, so you won't get distracted?
Okay, the point what he's saying is it says the story is, of course, King Chizkiyahu was told he's going to die, and he turned his face to the wall and he davened, and Hashem gave him 15 extra years to live. It says that he turned his face to the wall. From this we learned that it wasn't like what was the idea of turning his face to the wall? It wasn't turning his face away from the prophet, from Yeshaya. It was a kind of way of concentration. So when you're in front of the wall, it's like you're locked into kind of a space. So anything that's a distraction of that, then even if I hear what you're saying, that you kind of, but then what happens is you start wondering, and your words start, you're not focusing on what you should be saying. So those are things that you have to be.
What about if you're not sure which way is Mizrach, like, is it really important to figure it out?
If you can figure out, okay, where the base of where your Eretz Yisrael is, depending on which part of the world you are, but in our part in America it would be Mizrach. Then the best if you can't figure out, you can't find a map today. There's on your phone. if you don't have any of that ability, then it's okay. Of course, you say you're supposed to, again, concentrate as if you're standing in front of your
So
shalai.
then you're supposed to, but do you have to face a wall when you daven?
If it's a question between Mizrach and a wall, if it's a question between Mizrach and a wall, obviously you face Mizrach.
But let's say you're like in an airport or something and you don't know, so then you should face
So,
a
so it's,
wall.
try to find a wall or a beam. Like he
Okay.
says, even in the fields, he says, go by the trees, not in the open field.
Okay. And then when you were, I'm not sure if you mentioned this when you were talking about the nosach of the tefillah, but let's say you daven nosach Ashkenaz and then you end up in like a Hasidic shul where they daven nosach Sfard, so the kedusha is different. So what do you do about, do you say kedusha with them because it has certain things that we don't have in nosach Ashkenaz?
That's an excellent question. When we get to that, the question of when it comes to the repeat of the Shemoneh Esrei, listen, if you're davening in a shul and you know the words of your nusach, so it's okay to say your nusach if it's not the nagdishach or not the keser, etc. So to say your nusach, that's what most people do. Yes.
But I'm saying, can you do the part like Hester, like that part?
So instead of saying the keser, you say the part that you say.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Also,
Hold on,
I don't
Aaron.
know if you said,
Aaron, hold on 1 second. Barbara wants to ask
I just
before.
want to know if it's okay where you are, if it's okay
Baruch
safety
Hashem,
wise where you are, if the family's okay.
But Baruch Hashem, everything's okay. Thank you for asking. When I was telling the story, that's why I rushed through the story. I got an alarm saying that a message that there's going to be an alarm, but there was in other areas of Eretz Israel. I see now that in Tel Aviv, but not in Yerushalayim. Barbara, quickly, you have a question?
Yeah, what if the show would have mirrors in it on one side where they're praying? So what does that mean that you shouldn't pray in front of a mirror?
I'd be surprised if there are mirrors in the shul. Mirrors. But I mean, not talking about. Sometimes you have like reflective glass in the mechitza.
No, these are actual mirrors. These are actual mirrors, and
There shouldn't be mirrors in the shul. If there's mirrors in the shul, don't daven in front of the mirror. Don't stand in front of the mirror.
it's on the women's side though. That's why I'm
No,
asking.
I'm saying, but you could don't. Is there no other way to stand? There's no. If you're standing, there's the only way to stand is facing the mirror, like you're looking at yourself.
Oh no, I'm not looking at the mirror. I'm facing the ark, but you know the mirror is like to my right.
Okay,
And
that's he means to face the mirror, to look at a mirror.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I got two
Go ahead,
things. Okay, so my
right.
wife's
Quickly,
yeah.
I gotta go into the bomb shelter. Go quickly. Go
Oh,
in.
you have to go to the bomb shelter?
Oh no, it says you could get out. Sorry, it was the wrong message. Go ahead.
Okay. You make me worried because my daughter's there and she's sleeping.
No, it said you could it's just a
Okay.
message. Okay, go ahead.
So let me just say this. Okay. So my wife's Sephardic. Sometimes I end up in a Chabad shul. This is what I do, and just see if it's right. Then I got one other question. I just pick up their book and I just follow with them and say as they say and respond as they say. It makes it easier for me. Is that the proper thing to do, even though I'm Ashkenaz?
Say that again. Repeat the question
Okay,
again.
so my wife's Sephardic. I go to their shuls from time to time, more than often, and even sometimes when I go to Chabad shul, I pick up the book of the shul that I and just follow with them.
Okay. The point is, if you're davening, then if you don't have another siddur, another nusach, so what you should not be doing is mixing up the nuschos. That's what he's saying. I'm just we're reading what the Kitzur says here.
I don't mix up anything. When I go
Okay,
to Sephardic shul
okay.
with my family, with my wife's family, I just daven their way and I don't mix it. And when I go to Chabad, I just daven Chabad. It's easier for me than to figure out where I am in my book.
Okay, so if it's easier for you, then just to stick with the nusach that means with the shul that they're daven their nusach. Everything's the right nusach. So that's an okay plan.
Okay, now my other question is, in one of the Sephardic shuls on Ocean Parkway, it's known for their painted walls. I mean, it's even if you look on the internet and you look up the shul, there's a page and it tells you they have painted walls. So no one in the shul is distracted by it, but I know some rabbis who don't pray there say that's kind of wrong. But I want your opinion on this because like every wall is painted and no one's really in the shul paying attention to the wall when they're davening. But some of the outsiders say they shouldn't have.
Okay, that's a longer discussion in general. Like I told Barbara, we're talking about mainly with facing the painting. If you're facing a painting that distracts you, so that's again
Never distracted me, but they're all
Wait, I'm
Jewish
saying, but
paintings.
so there's an idea not to be distracted. He says clearly not to have paintings. Again, there's also a concept in halacha where things that are your norm, right? That's what you. So then you don't like it says about the birchat kohanim. Like if it's a person who's a kohen who may have some things about him that would distract you from your focus, so then maybe he shouldn't be blessing the people. But when he lives in a city that everyone's used to it, so they don't look at it as interesting or strange, so then it would be okay. I think the same thing would apply over here. That if it's in a shul where already everyone's used to that, so kind of it kind of you don't it's not a it's less of a distraction. But again, I mean, just reading from what he says in the text, and we didn't get to the footnotes yet, then it's best not to have paintings in the shul. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I do gotta go. Laila Tov, Shavua Tov, and we should have Basuras Tovas only for Klal Yisrael. Take care.
So,
Stay
Yep, there was
safe.
a question
Stay
in the
safe,
chat
Rabbi.
that Yehuda wrote. Question in the chat.
I saw that. We answered it about the Tefillah. Laila Tov, everyone.